Many organizations treat data security as a static state. They build a secure database, assign access permissions, and assume the information inside is protected, much like locking a valuable item inside a vault. But information is entirely dynamic. To be useful, it must move. It gets copied, exported, modified, analyzed, and handed off between different people and external systems. When information moves, risk moves with it. The same file that is perfectly protected inside a secure database faces an entirely different set of vulnerabilities the moment it is exported to a spreadsheet. This diagram maps the information lifecycle. It provides a chronological framework to track how data moves, starting from creation or collection, passing through storage, use, sharing, retention, and ending in disposal. At every single node, the vulnerability profile of the data mutates. We can trace this mutation using a standard student support record. This packet contains personal identifiers, contact details, and private advising notes. Watch how its exposure changes as it travels the track. You will see that real-world data exposure is rarely the result of a cinematic hacker breaking through a firewall. Massive leaks and privacy violations are overwhelmingly caused by normal, everyday workflows breaking down across these 6 stages. Information enters an organization through 2 distinct points. It is either collected from external sources, like a customer filling out a form, or it is created internally by employees and systems generating new reports, logs, or code. Before data ever hits a server, an operational baseline must be established. Information should only enter the lifecycle if there is a legitimate documented business purpose for it to exist. Notice this web form taking in our student support record at the first node. The intake process asks for the student's name and email, but it also demands a social security number and a full home address for a simple academic advising appointment. This is excessive collection, and it creates a compounding threat. By gathering those unnecessary identifiers, the organization has permanently inflated its attack surface. Every extra data point is now a liability that must be secured, governed, audited, and eventually deleted. The safest piece of data is the one that was never unnecessarily collected or created in the first place. Once collected, information requires approved storage. These are specific, vetted locations where confidentiality, integrity, and availability controls are actively maintained by the organization. The moment an employee saves a file to an unapproved location, like a local desktop, a personal cloud drive, or an unmanaged spreadsheet, those formal protections instantly vanish. Assuming the data is stored correctly, we move to the use phase. Use occurs exclusively when an authorized user interacts with the data strictly inside its approved system boundary. Look at the visual parameters of this stage. The student record sits securely inside the approved database, but notice the strict boundary illuminating around it. Having authorized access to a system does not grant an employee the right to use it however they want. Information is collected for specific operational reasons. When data gathered for one authorized reason is utilized for an entirely different purpose, we call it purpose drift. If a staff member pulls up sensitive student notes for an unrelated disciplinary review, they operate outside the permitted boundary. They haven't hacked the system, but they have violated the intent of the data. Many severe privacy failures occur without a single line of broken encryption. They happen simply because legitimate access was used outside the original operational intent. The risk profile spikes violently during the sharing phase. Sharing is the exact moment information moves outside its original system boundary, its working context, or its approved recipient group. Organizations often assume that as long as information stays within the company, it is safe. This ignores the massive vulnerability generated by internal sharing. Here is the exact moment of failure. An advisor exports the student record from the secure database into a spreadsheet, intending to email it for a quick review. By crossing that perimeter, the exported data bypasses all database logging and access controls. It is now completely unmanaged, multiplying across inboxes and local hard drives. External sharing pushes this problem further. When data is sent to external vendors, partners, or cloud platforms, the organization encounters third-party risk. Sending data to a vendor means the originating organization completely inherits the vulnerability profile of that vendor's security architecture. A breach at the vendor is a breach of your data. Sharing is an operational necessity, but it transfers control of the asset. That transfer requires specific administrative controls, such as strict minimum necessary sharing rules and formal data processing agreements. Information eventually outlives its immediate usefulness and enters retention. This phase is a strategic balancing act, determining exactly how long it is justified to keep information active. Organizations frequently suffer from over-retention, keeping vast archives of old data just in case. This expands the blast radius of a potential breach and drives up storage costs while providing zero operational value. Over time, the utility of this information drops to zero, but the risk it carries remains entirely active. A 10-year-old spreadsheet of student contacts is useless to an advisor today, but highly valuable to an attacker. The opposite extreme is under-retention. Prematurely deleting data destroys institutional memory, eliminates vital legal evidence, and disrupts operational continuity. Managing time-based risk requires enforcing automated retention schedules, establishing strict archival permissions, and setting mandatory review dates to evaluate what stays and what goes. Hoarding old organizational data is never a safety measure. It is a compounding, invisible liability. The final phase is disposal. Many users assume this simply means highlighting a file, pressing delete, and emptying a recycle bin. But standard deletion ignores the primary failure condition of the stage, the uncontrolled copy. This network map shows what happens when we delete the primary file. The central student record is removed from the database. Because of earlier uncontrolled sharing, the organization assumes the data is gone. Meanwhile, ghost copies survive in emails, personal drives, and vendor backups. Proper execution requires verifiable disposal. Organizations must hunt down these copies, deprovision third-party platforms, verify deletion logs, and utilize cryptographic shredding to ensure the data is mathematically unrecoverable. For highly sensitive physical media or hard drives, this extends to requiring a strict chain of custody and a formal certificate of destruction from a specialized vendor. True disposal is mathematically impossible to execute if the previous 5 lifecycle stages were not strictly governed. The most devastating information lifecycle failures are rarely caused by attackers actively breaking in. They are caused by the friction of normal, everyday work routines. Employees cutting corners to save time, forms capturing too much data, and old files left forgotten in shared drives. Securing data requires a continuous architecture. Administrative, technical, and physical controls must travel with the asset as it moves through systems and through time. It is impossible to apply maximum security to every single file an organization produces. So how do you decide which data gets strictly governed and which gets standard protection? That decision relies on data classification, the rules engine that dictates exactly how the lifecycle track operates. We will map that engine in the next module.